Hello everyone. Today's video is all about helping you to notice and figure out what the key details are in a story. The key details are important details. We're going to use this book, Caps for Sale, to help us. I'm going to read the story first and then go back to the text and talk with you about parts that are really important, those key details. You can be thinking along the way as you listen to the story what you think the key details are. Let's get started. Caps for Sale by Esper Slobotkina, HarperCollins Publishers. Once there was a peddler who sold caps. But he was not like an ordinary peddler carrying his wares on his back. He carried them on top of his head. First, he had on his own checked cap, then a bunch of gray caps, then a bunch of brown caps, then a bunch of blue caps, and on the very top, a bunch of red caps. He walked up and down the streets, holding himself very straight so as not to upset his caps. As he went along, he called, "Caps, caps for sale, 50 cents a cap." One morning, he couldn't sell any caps. He walked up and down the street, calling, "Caps, caps for sale, 50 cents a cap." But nobody wanted any caps that day. Nobody wanted even a red one. He began to feel hungry, but he had no money for lunch. "I think I'll go for a walk in the country," said he, and he walked out of town, slowly, slowly, so as not to upset his caps. He walked for a long time until he came to a great big tree. "That's a nice place for a rest," thought he, and he sat down very slowly under the tree and leaned back little by little against the tree trunk so as not to disturb the caps on his head. Then he put up his hand to feel if they were straight. First his own checked cap, then the gray caps, then the brown caps, then the blue caps, then the red caps on the very top. They were all there, so he went to sleep, and he slept for a very long time. When he woke up, he was refreshed and rested. But before standing up, he felt with his hand to make sure his caps were in the right place. All he felt was his own checked cap. He looked to the right of him. No caps. He looked to the left of him. No caps. He looked in back of him. No caps. He looked behind the tree. No caps. And then he looked up into the tree. And what do you think he saw? You know what's coming if you already know this story. On every branch sat a monkey, and on every monkey was a gray or brown or blue or red cap. The peddler looked at the monkeys. The monkeys looked at the peddler. He didn't know what to do. Finally, he spoke to them. "You monkeys, you," he said, shaking a finger at them. "You give me back my caps." But the monkeys only shook their fingers back at him and said, "Tss, tss, tss." Now he felt quite angry. So he shook both hands at them and said, "You monkeys, you give me back my caps." But the monkeys only shook both their hands back at him and said, "Tss, tss, tss." Now he was really quite angry. He stamped his foot and he said, "You monkeys, you better give me back my caps." But the monkeys only stamped their feet back at him and said, "Tss, tss, tss." By this time, the peddler was really very, very angry. He stamped both his feet and shouted, "You monkeys, you must give me back my caps." But the monkeys only stamped both of their feet back at him and said, "Tss, tss, tss." At last, he became so angry that he pulled off his own cap, threw it on the ground, and began to walk away. Now think about what you know about those monkeys. I'll bet you can make a prediction right now in your brain about what will happen next. Let's see if you're right. But then each monkey pulled off his cap, and all the gray caps, all the brown caps, and all the blue caps, and all the red caps came flying down out of the tree. So the peddler picked up his caps and put them back on his head. First his own checked cap, then the gray caps, then the brown caps, then the blue caps, and then the red caps on the very top. And slowly, slowly, he walked back to town calling, "Caps, caps for sale, 50 cents a cap." And that's the end of that story. I know you already know how to figure out what the peddler's problem was and how the problem got solved. Let's concentrate today on the important details. Lots of fiction stories have many, many details, but when you are sharing with someone about a story you read, you don't have to include all the details, just the key details, the most important ones. In this book, it seems to me that the most important details get repeated. We hear about them more than once. Let me show you what I mean. In the beginning, when we first hear about the peddler, we're told by the writer that he wore his caps on top of his head. It even says in the text that he was not like an ordinary peddler, carrying his wares on his back. He carried them on his head. That seems important to me. The writer goes on to tell us the order that the caps are in. It starts out with the gray caps, then the brown, then the blue, and the red. I know those things are important because the writer talks a lot about not upsetting his caps, because they were on his head, he has to do certain things to make sure they stay there. So walking slowly and putting his hand up to his head are important details because he's checking on whether or not his caps are okay on top of his head. Even after the monkeys steal his caps and he gets them back, I noticed that the peddler puts them back in the very same order, with the gray ones on the bottom, then the brown, then the blue, then the red. Because I hear about that more than once, I'm thinking that's an important detail. For some reason, the peddler liked to have his caps in a certain order, and the writer repeats that order for us more than once. And when the peddler wakes up and he's all rested and refreshed, the writer shows us in the words and with the pictures that the first thing the peddler does is to check the top of his head to see if everything is fine with his caps. But all he sees is his own red cap, his own checked cap, sorry. The writer has lots of details about where he looked for those missing caps. So I'm thinking that's probably important because it talks specifically about how he looked to the right of him, no caps, to the left of him, no caps, in back of him, no caps, behind the tree, no caps. Okay, he tried really hard to find those caps. And we know it because of those key details about the places that he looked. The last place he looked, of course, was up in the tree. And the fact that every single monkey is wearing one of his caps is a key detail. All right, every single one of those caps is up in the tree. To help us see how the problem gets solved, there's some important details about what the peddler does, and then, of course, what the monkeys do. So the writer spends a few pages talking about how he yelled at them with one finger, and then yelled at them with both hands, and then stamped one foot and yelled at them, and then both feet while yelling at those monkeys. And of course, the monkeys do the same thing back. So that's an important detail too. And the way that we know it is because when he finally throws his own cap on the ground, since he's so frustrated, the monkeys do too. And then the peddler gets his caps back. So having the monkeys copy everything that the peddler does is important because we wouldn't understand the ending of the story if we didn't understand how they did exactly what he did. So when he throws his own cap down, they do too, and the peddler gets all of his caps back. So readers, when you are reading, you can be thinking as you go along about, is this important? What's really important here? And then remember those important things so that you can tell others about the story and you can remind yourself of what the story was about. The people in it, what they did, what the problems were, how they got solved, and so on. All those elements of story. Till next time, see you, stay well.